Good evening, everyone. My name is Bryan DeNovellis, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the panel discussion for the 2018 Monmouth Film Festival. On behalf of Nicholas Marchese and everyone who's worked so hard and diligently over the past several months on this film festival, we thank you for joining us not only throughout the day, but through this panel discussion, hopefully into the evening and tomorrow as well. So for the next 90 minutes, we will have an informal discussion about film and television and video and where it's gone and where it's going. And all of these professionals up here will share their experiences and their knowledge with you, but we really want to keep this as informal and casual, like a conversation. And we hope that you will have a lot of questions, because that's really what is going to generate a lot of interest and a lot of passion and to bring out the best in them. So, without further ado, what I would like to do is I would like to introduce my esteemed colleagues, beginning to my right. She is an Emmy-nominated producer. She is the head of production at Canvas Media Studios, where she's produced a couple of most notable television series. One is Vanity, and another is the Maybelline and fashion competition show, Wear It to Win It. And here's my favorite part. She's a genuine Jersey girl who grew up right here in New Jersey in Monmouth County and attended Wall High School. She is Allison Vanore. To her left, subbing at the last minute, I might add, Christopher Adams unfortunately could not make it, but it is my pleasure to bring to you David Sperling. He is an Emmy-nominated director of photography, films, television, documentaries. He's done it all for more than 25 years, and he also teaches courses at Rutgers University. His name is David Sperling. Yay. To his left, my immediate right, she is a professional animator. She is a director and designer at Aardman Nathan Love, as well as a professor at the School of Visual Arts. She has worked in various companies such as Pixar and Facebook and many more. Her short animated film, most notably Spacebound, has been screened around the world, and if you haven't seen it, you'll love it. It is a story about a dog and a boy, best friends, who get lost in space, but it's not so much about how they get lost, but it's the journey that they take. And it's not an end, but more of a friendship and a bond that they learn a lot about each other and where they're going. Spacebound, look it up. Her name is Ellen Sue. Now to my left, he is a director of recruitment for one of the most prestigious film academies in the world, the New York Film Academy, and he is a part of their visual and performing arts programs. He was a casting director in New York for 12 years, and his name is Roger Del Pozo. To his left, she is an entertainment lawyer with more than 7 years of experience working in legal fields of the film and television industries. Her name is Marissa Crespo. And last but not least, on the far left, the man with the coolest mustache on the planet. He is currently the Associate Director for the New Jersey Motion Picture and Television Commission. He's also produced 2 award-winning independent films. And if there is a film or a television series that comes to New Jersey, I believe it must go through you?
Yeah, they usually always will, yeah.
So he is the gatekeeper. His name is David Schoner. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, let's begin. And I will have the first question. We'll have microphones on the left, center, and right sides of the stage. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand, all right? We want to keep this as informal as possible, but we want all of them to share their knowledge, and as you have questions, we'll find you and allow you to ask questions as well. So let's begin with a topic that really has come to the forefront over the last couple of months. Governor Murphy here in New Jersey has signed it into law. It was a bill, now a law, that says that if you make your film or television show here in New Jersey, you are eligible for millions of dollars in tax credits. So if you bring your film here, whatever your production costs are, they now offer you, the state of New Jersey, 30% of your production costs back in your pocket. Furthermore, if you film it in areas of South Jersey like Atlantic counties and Camden counties, you get 35% back. So really, they're trying to compete with the likes of New York and other places where there are a lot of films and television series being done, and they're hoping to bring you, the producers and directors and filmmakers, here to New Jersey. So let's begin with you, David. How has this become, and how will it become, a game changer?
Well, it already has become a game changer. Governor Murphy signed the bill into law on July 3rd, and needless to say, we have been inundated with Hulu, Amazon, Showtime, HBO, CBS, you name the network or the distribution company, they are considering New Jersey. Currently, we have a TV series that's already committed to the state, and we have 2 features that are committed to the state. And it's something that is very exciting because, this would have not happened prior to this past year. So it's very exciting.
Has anyone here on the panel done any work here in New Jersey with films or short films or any type of television? Allison?
A couple years, I guess it was maybe 5 years ago, I shot an independent feature film here in New Jersey. It kind of happened by accident because of Hurricane Sandy. We were going to be shooting in New York, and our location got really badly damaged, so we ended up shooting at my dad's house. Lucky dad. It was definitely an extremely low-budget film. Made it for, a very small budget, but a lot of really passionate actors and filmmakers in the area. It was fun to come back to New Jersey and make something. So it's exciting that there's even more of an incentive to come back and bring bigger projects back to the state. I live in Los Angeles now, so and I do shoot in New York. But anytime I can come to New Jersey and do something here, I would welcome it.
So even though you shot it at your dad's house, do you need permission? Do you need to go through the legal course? Or can you just start filming and there
Well,
it is?
it really is going to depend on what town she filmed it in. And each town in New Jersey, we have approximately 362, don't quote me, 362 towns. And each municipality in New Jersey views filmmaking differently. Everyone has a totally different view of it. It isn't like New York City where what the mayor says goes for all 5 boroughs. So I have a feeling if it was a shore community that there probably was nothing, and her show was probably so small that you wouldn't even know they were in the house. But theoretically, you would. Yes.
Yeah, we contacted the town and they didn't care.
There you go. That's right. Yes.
And your dad, he didn't mind?
No, but luckily he was also out of town, so he didn't have to witness any of it.
All right, excellent. So here's a question for everyone on the panel. All right, we all have dreams, we all have aspirations, and we all want to be successful in what we do. We may not get rich right away. We hope to get rich, but even if not, we hope that success brings us a lot of joy in what we do. So how did you all get started in your careers, and maybe share your path and how you got to be where you are today?
Do you want to start?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Entertainment.
Yeah, so with entertainment law, it's really interesting because I was someone who was passionate about it, and I knew that's what I wanted to do going into law school. And entertainment law is a very competitive business, and it's really hard to get into. You kind of have to already know the business in order to get the opportunity, so it's kind of this chicken and egg theory, right? So I kind of spent my time in law school taking externship opportunities and just jumping on independent film productions wherever they needed assistance. If they needed a line producer, if they needed music supervision services, I basically kind of gave my services for free during that time in the creative role to understand the business nature of what it takes. In addition, I kind of also started off transitioning from immigration advocacy work to immigration artist visas. So it's a very niche practice where for OMP visas, for artists who are foreign coming into the United States to do their art form, it's a specific process that not a lot of attorneys know how to do. So I thought that was a great marketing chip to kind of transition into the transactional side of entertainment.
Wow. Roger?
Sure. So I studied acting and filmmaking when I went to school. And I was the first person in my family to go to college. And when I told them I was going to college, that I was going to study theater and I was going to study film, it was just very frowned upon. It was not a very positive thing, but they knew I loved to do it. Actually, they were very supportive with a lack of just an understanding of what that entailed, but probably wouldn't have been the first choice, but that's what I did. I loved it. I've been a freak about movies my whole life. I love movies. There was a period of my life, I think I was watching 2 to 3 movies a day and was just very into it. So when I went to school, I was studying acting, I was studying filmmaking and film theory as well. I thought for a period of time I might want to write about film. And then when I finished college, I went to an acting conservatory for 2 years in New York, the Stella Adler Conservatory, and I studied there. And when I graduated, I didn't really think that acting was what I wanted to do full-time. And I had an opportunity through a friend to interview for the job of an office assistant, really the office manager, but I think that sounds a little glamorous. It was really basically like the first step into the industry. As I said in my workshop, if anyone was in there, I was the first person in the office, the last person to leave. I changed the garbage pails, I walked the dog, I unclogged the toilets, I answered the phone, I opened the mail. I made $400 a week, could barely survive, but I learned the business and I learned about casting, and within the first year I became a casting assistant. The second year I was a casting director. That meant I was in the studio, I was running sessions. I happened to be at a very, very busy casting company in New York, Beth Melski Casting, and I probably worked on about 1,000 television commercials while I was there. Then I went freelance. I started working for ad agencies, doing my own work, casting, and about 10 years ago, I made the transition into education. New York Film Academy was looking for someone to handle all of the auditions for people that were coming through the school. My background in casting seemed like a good fit. I wanted to go into education. And then once I got involved with Film Academy, that's an enormous just infrastructure. We have 5 campuses all over the world. And I was able to, through hard work, just parlay what I was doing into a much bigger position at the school, and was fortunate enough to be able to really never have another job that wasn't related to this industry from when I got out of school. So everyone in my family now is glad I studied film and theater because I've had some success doing it. And it really just came out of a love of doing it and just hard work and starting at the bottom, which I think I was able to do when I was young, and just worked my way through it, and that's it. Yeah.
Awesome. Ellen?
Hi. So I went to the School of Visual Arts, and prior to that, I'd grown up, I feel like lots of people in my generation, Toonami kind of brought this whole new world of animation into our lives, and it became really accessible for everyone. And so just growing up watching those shows, I was just in love, and I wanted to be able to capture that energy that you can't really capture in live acting and action and all that stuff. So going into SVA, I had somehow decided I wanted to do 3D animation, and in that time, I did go to Pixar and intern there and learn from their pipeline. And just kind of after graduation, working in the industry for a little bit, I kind of had to just realize that my real passion was within 2D animation, within design, within actually drawing instead of the 3D side of it. I've recently landed, 3 years ago, landed the directing gig with Aardman Nathan Love. And if you guys are familiar with Aardman over in London, they do Wallace and Gromit, Shaun the Sheep, and we are basically their New York headquarters because they also do commercials as well. And so, yeah. These days, I direct short films, commercials, online content, and yeah. Oh, I also, teach at School of Visual Arts in the junior computer art department.
Well, I did want to say that that I did shoot a couple of movies in New Jersey a while back, lower budget movies, and I'm really excited about the tax initiative because I hate the commute into New York.
You and everyone else, that's all they ever tell us. It's just a short thing. We were working on Jim Jarmusch when he was doing Patterson.
And the movie is called Patterson. It takes place in Patterson. The lead character's name is Patterson. It's Patterson, Patterson, Patterson. And Amazon would not let him shoot more than 8 days in Patterson. The rest was shot in Yonkers and Queens. And the DP of that film came up to me when they were scouting it and is like, please do something. I can't stand, we're not doing it here. So thank you.
So my route, however, into becoming a filmmaker was, I guess, somewhat bizarre. And when I say these two words, you'll understand the meaning of the word bizarre. Richard Nixon. I was supposed to be drafted. I was supposed to go to Vietnam. And through a whole series of my draft board screwing up, Richard Nixon deciding not to draft people, I was studying astrophysics in college. And, wow, suddenly, March of my senior year of college, I wasn't going to be drafted anymore. They added 365 to my number. And I had always loved still photography, taken a lot of courses and so on. It was kind of like a third minor. So I was like, okay, I'm going to grad school, still photography. I know exactly where I want to go. I want to study with Jerry Uelsman, Todd Walker in Florida. Call down there. They're both on sabbatical next year. That spring, I visited New York, stopped by NYU Film School, got an application, filled it out, got accepted middle of August, started 2 weeks later. Thought, oh great, I'll learn how to make, I really enjoyed like Kenneth Anger and, all the really indie bizarre stuff. And the next thing I knew, I loved working on crews. And, got out of film school. Basically, my first jobs were in editing, spent about 8 years doing that until I said, I have to be back in production. I can't take editing anymore. And at that point, I kind of worked my way up to being a DP, leveraged people that I knew that, that I had cut for, and they ended up later hiring me to shoot features or TV series. And but way too much of my work was either in LA or in Queens.
That's going to change.
and I do. I could almost walk here. I live in Tinton Falls.
Wow.
Well, growing up, I always wanted to be a filmmaker, so it was kind of had that path figured out early on. I went to school in Arizona, and then right after school, I went to Los Angeles, and I started working as an assistant for a motion graphics design house. And I was actually the assistant to the lead animator, and I knew nothing about animation. The first day, he said, "Okay, great. So what do you know about animation?" And I said, "Nothing." And he's like, "Then why are you here?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Okay, well, go talk to the production manager then." And so I ended up assisting her more than I assisted the animator there. And actually, a couple months into working there, around the time when my summer job was going to be coming to an end, the production manager told me, "So I accepted another job, and I'm going to tell the owner of the company that you should take my job." And, the owner was not thrilled with that idea, but he didn't have any other options because she was leaving. And I went from being the assistant at 22 for, the studio of 15 plus people who were all at least 10 years older than me, and I was now managing all of them. And I was there for 5 years. So learned business, small business pretty quickly, how to manage accounts. Disney was one of our biggest clients, so I was dealing with the account side of things, but then also dealing with designers and animators and photographers and copywriters and all of that. So learned a lot really fast, but I also knew I didn't want to be in an office. So after leaving that job, I knew that I wanted to produce, and I started producing or finding any project I could produce on the indie feature side and on the web series side, because around that time people were starting to make a lot of content online. So I said, okay, in the first year of me being, unemployed traditionally, I wanted to make sure I got my first feature producing credit and first web series credit. And I did most of that just by networking and using all of the contacts I had and trying to expand my network of people so that I could get those credits, and that's kind of where it all began.
Excellent. All right, so you learned quite a bit about the panelists up here. If you have any questions now, let's open it up to questions. If you have a question, raise your hand. I still have a number of questions, but I want to open it up to you to engage the audience a little bit. So, does anyone out there have a question for any of the panelists on legal, animation, film, television, the business side of things, the acting side of things? Anyone? In the middle?
I don't know if this is a production question, but I come from more of a writing background, so I think that's where it fits in. But the question has to do with titling your film, and I know if you're writing a book, there's a lot of focus on, what the quote best or good title is. And I wondered, I guess it's a two-part question and then a comment that I have. The first, is about, well, how important is it, the titling of your film? And the reason this comes to my mind is that I had the pleasure of watching the Crime Plus Punishment film this afternoon. And I thought it was a really important film, but I almost didn't see it. I think because the title didn't attract me the first time I went through the brochure. And the only reason I saw it is because I got a later email that didn't have the title of the film at all, but it just said something about the content. And then I thought of it later, and I thought, well, if I was going to name that film, I might call it, like the NYPD 12 Lives on the Line. Now, the Lives on the Line is a phrase that was used by a few of the characters when they were in the actual film. But it has more of a striving feeling to it, whereas to me, the Crime and Punishment, it has like a very placid and generic kind of, so anyway, so that's my comment on that title. I'd also be interested in, I don't know if you all saw that film, if you had any comments. And I don't mean to pick on that film, but I'm just curious what you might think about that.
Yeah, I think you made a few really good points there. I think that titling something is really important. I've certainly produced films that have had the titles changed once they go to distribution. A title, really, like you mentioned, is more about marketing and informing your audience and pulling in the audience that you're looking for. So I think as a filmmaker, it's important to understand who your audience is and know how to find them. So a title can be really important. A lot of the times distributors really understand that, and as filmmakers we might be resistant to taking that advice, but sometimes people on that business side of things, they understand the marketing and what's going to work. A really simple thing also I've seen happen to films that I've produced, I had a title that started with a W, and we had to change it to a title that started with an A, because guess what? It ends up at the top of the list, right? Or a title with a number in it ends up at the top of the list because the numbers start first. So it doesn't mean that everything should follow that rule, but it's just things to keep in mind. How do we search for films nowadays where whether we're Googling or we're on Netflix and things are being connected and recommended. So keywords and search engine optimization is the type of thing that you kind of need to think about also in titling things. So just a few thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely second that as well. I mean, I don't come from the creative space, but I think as a consumer, and also just on the legal side, just understanding too, as far as the creative aspect, I think the way I look at a title is almost like your thesis statement, right? Similar to the log line. That's what's important, is that what's going to grab, your audience in order to even want to view your film, along with how you kind of package together the film from a visual standpoint. But I think you're hitting it right on the head. I mean, it's really about the search engine optimization, whether or not you're also, for distribution purposes, trying to get into a different market where it's maybe a title that doesn't resonate well with an audience, so you might need to rename it.
When you said that, when you raised that question, I started thinking about recent movies and started to think about the title, and it really is important. Like La La Land, Get Out, like that does really there's a reason why those movies are why Get Out was named Get Out. It's a very arresting title. I would probably say that Crime Plus Punishment or Crime and Punishment it probably has some play on one of the most famous novels ever written, Crime and Punishment. So I'm sure that they're trying to play on the Dostoevsky book, which is just extraordinarily famous. And Crime and Punishment it's an iconic book. So I'm sure they're trying to have some, I'm not sure, I haven't spoken to the filmmaker, but I would imagine that they're trying to have some connection or just association with one of the most famous books written about murder, the legal system. So I would imagine that they were trying to play on that. I don't know that though, but title is extraordinarily important. Pulp Fiction, Mean Streets, Goodfellas. I think about those things, and like you said, I think it is a thesis statement for the film. I would agree.
I just wanted to add that probably half the projects, half the films I've worked on have been retitled. They've had working titles, and they end up with titles that seem completely different. There was one horror film I shot that ended up being retitled. It was released under 4 different titles. It was a very bad film. And there was another film that I shot called The Girl on the Train. No, not the one that you saw. This one was released 1 year before the book called The Girl on the Train was released, that the most recent movie was based on. So, yeah, the titles, basically it's like a headline. Are you even going to look at the article? That's where, but you wait until the film is done to try to figure out who your audience really is. And then once you know who your audience is, you figure out the title accordingly.
Hi, my name's Tom. I'm about to launch my first web show. It's called Hollywood Vampire. It was shot in LA. It's 12 episodes about a 20-year-old vampire gets kicked out of his country and goes to LA to get his dream girl. And we're just people with credit cards and cameras, and I just recently moved back to New Jersey and doing it from here. Any advice? We plan on launching on Funny or Die in October for Halloween, and we started our social media campaign 2 weeks ago to build up the people. But I have my partners have no clue what to do next. Once we get it up on and it's running, do you have any advice or what you would do with that next?
Well, I think you have a lot of things going for you already, I think, starting a social media campaign and presence online, the earlier you can do that, the better. I think, the second you are about to start reaching out with a script to people, that's when you should start putting content out there and building your audience. So the sooner you can do that, the better. Putting it on Funny or Die is great. If that's the type of audience you're going for and the genre and if it makes sense for that space, that's a great place to go because they have an audience built in already. I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the title. It's like understanding your audience and trying to reach them, right? So you also need to think about where do those people spend time? Does it make sense to start a Reddit thread? Does it make sense to, have an Instagram, or maybe it doesn't? Or, how can you be creative? And it's really about just drawing the eyes to it. And, also using the resources you do have to get some publicity for yourself. So whether or not you have the money to hire a publicist, or if you just, start with your hometown and talk to the publications and the people in the town and see if you can get a little bit of news. I think use the things around you to start building, and that's where you start, and you go from there. And hopefully it'll keep catching on. And it's the shows that can keep going and can sustain that momentum that it'll end up paying off for you.
I was going to say also, if you can attract like fanboys, fangirls in a way where there's some sort of conversation that you can create about the web series that is on Reddit or on any sort of social media platform, where you start talking about that conversation. Well, what's really going on with this character? What's happening with this character? That fanboy, fangirl, and I'm not like minimizing it, but they will, all of a sudden, people are going to start talking about your production.
Yeah, and I am like very susceptible to marketing and advertisements and Facebook ads. And I mean, I'm aware of this, and I know that, Brooklyn Nine-Nine was a show that had been around for a very long time, and I had no interest in watching it at all. And then somebody posted, the Brooklyn Nine-Nine Facebook page posted a little clip of just like the performances of one character, and like, couple second lines that they deliver, and just the jokes between characters and the banter, and it was hilarious, and it got that traction of viral, viral video, viral memes, and that's what drew me to wanting to watch that show. And I also run a side business, and like that whole thing about like marketing, paid advertising, and all of that stuff, I feel like oftentimes it's not worth it unless you have thousands of dollars to pour into a campaign, So like if you have a small budget, if you know very clearly what kind of crowd you're going for, I would try to do the organic kind of advertising and target yourself. Like the Reddit crowd versus the Imager crowd versus the Facebook crowd is completely different. And so you definitely want to just figure where you want to be. And if it's vampires, then like, groups that like maybe do D&D, or like there's like the Steve Lichman, I don't know if anybody's read those books, but like they have a great gathering, and like they got a huge gathering like through Kickstarter and through releasing pages of their book on Imager, and like that's how they got all of that like funding for themselves. So yeah.
Great question. There was another one in front.
Thank you. My name is Yolanda, and I'd like to ask each of you, what was the turning point in your career, the thing that happened that made you go from low level to higher level, or from really low level to really high level?
You're going to start on that side,
I don't think it's one moment. At least it wasn't for me. I think it's a lot of hard work and persistence, and eventually you cross that line, wherever that line is. I think it's, being a hard worker, or being an honest person, surrounding yourself with people that are similar, and you kind of rise with those people. So luckily, when I started, especially just doing web series, right? When I started doing web series, it was kind of like, oh yeah, okay, wannabe TV, creator or whatever. And we were making short form content, right? Short form episodes, they maybe were 10 minutes each. It was a sci-fi comedy, and no one really thought like, oh, in a couple of years I'll be Emmy nominated for a short form series online. But it was something that we were really excited about and proud of, and we just continued making that type of content. And the fun thing about doing that in 2009, 2010 was, I've been doing content online since then, and the way technology has changed and the audiences have changed, and just how how much more accepted that content is, and here we are all watching streaming shows, and these shows are huge and have huge budgets and really like mass appeal. It's been really exciting and interesting. So I think it was just kind of a timing thing as well, because of where the kind of the world of streaming media has gone. So that show in particular, Vanity, kind of all things aligned really well. It was short form content. It was for an MCN on YouTube who wanted to get into scripted content. They were doing a lot of makeup tutorials, beauty, makeup, lifestyle tutorials for women. Maybelline wanted a scripted show, wanted to do something different, and kind of all the right things aligned for us to launch that and use that audience that was already there, but tell a show that we were excited about and passionate about. Yeah, so that's kind of the way it all came together.
I think it was from working with people who really made me bring my game up. They made me bring my A game every day. And, I can look at several times when I see kind of quantum leaps, but only looking back at them. Day to day, it was really, you do the work, you do your best work, and so on. And then I look back and I say, whoa, my work on that film compared with everything I did before. I mean, for me, the first film, even though it wasn't the first film I shot, the first film that I really thought of myself as a director of photography was Street Trash, which is this very strange midnight movie. And everything I had shot before that, I was really just a cameraman. And on Street Trash, we started every morning in downtown Brooklyn at 6 in the morning, shot all day. We were in a junkyard for about 80% of the time, and you just had to give 110% the whole time. And then the next time that I really looked back, I think it was probably the Remember When series, when so much of it was really based on shooting tests, which is something that I had always done in advance of doing series or movies. But there was one day when we shot tests before the show started, and we had thought that we knew exactly how we were going to light the show. And I went in and tried 2 or 3 things, and nothing worked. And here we were about a week and a half away from production, and it's like, well, what am I going to do? And we just kept shooting, and then we found what basically was magic that gave us a look that was 1939. And we were in a tiny studio. There was no room for anything. It was a crazy show. We started out very, very low budget, at least for a SAG TV show. And we got a lot of notoriety very quickly, but it was so much of it was just from what we garnered from those tests and developing a look.
I seem to be the youngest panelist here, and so I feel like I've definitely grown a lot faster than some of my colleagues that I've graduated with. And so much of that is just bringing your A game to whatever job you're going to be at, because I'm sure everybody here has dreams of, doing something big. But in the meantime, you still have to pay your bills, you still have to pay your college loans, and you're going to be doing something else in that time, whether it's an internship or something else that it's not quite what you want to do. And it's important to just show that you are still doing the best possible job you can in that role. Because opportunities, it's very rare, and it's also doesn't come at the time you might want them to, and it really depends on how well you can make other people remember you for when that opportunity rolls around. So like we get emails from freelancers every single day, or students that want to intern with us, and we don't have anything for them at the time, you know, and we don't have the ability to hire anybody at the time. But once those opportunities roll around, it's like, okay, who do we remember out of these like millions of emails that we get? And it's just being able to stand out and being able to like, oh, we hired that person as an intern, but they did so many things. They were like, you know, really gung-ho about everything, and they did more than what we hired them to do. So like we know that that person's a great person to work with, and when the opportunity rolls around, we want to bring them back. And that's kind of how I got into directing, which was I had worked with another director who hired me because we had worked at the same studio at some point, you know, not on the same job, but through just socializing, networking, and somehow getting him to take a look at my portfolio, you know, on our free time. He was like, wow, this stuff is great. And then the next job that he had, you know, that didn't really have a budget, he reached out to me and was like, yes, I want to do this, let's make this amazing. And that project I got kind of like a designer animator credit for, which rolled into the next project, you know, that a different supervisor at another studio who had some other job outside of work, you know, that he needed to hire me for, and then I got art director credit, and then it's just this like momentum that you build, and it just rolls and rolls. And you know, and then all of these people that you've worked for, you've done favors for because of budgetary reasons, because I mean, like, cool jobs are always the ones that have no budgets. You know, like when you have creative freedom, you have no money. So, you know, like when the time came around where another director that I've worked with could not take a directing job, he's like, hey, this person can do it. And that's how I got my first directing gig. And then from there, it's just, yeah. And I think the other part is kind of presence and making yourself like able for other people to find you, you know, like branding, essentially, like making sure that your website is clear, that when people search your name, it goes to your website and it doesn't go to some weird, I don't know what else, you know? And like, if your platform is Instagram, Facebook, whatever, just making sure you're tagging your work, you know, that the other people know your style and like what you can bring to the table.
I was going to say, for me, it had to do initially when I was in college and the internship thing. Yeah. Back when I went to college, which was, you know, maybe the oldest person here, second oldest, but went to college. Back then, you didn't want to be on TV. You know, feature films were where it's at. And I remember my internship, they wanted to keep on sticking me at a cable station. Well, I don't want to do cable. I want feature film. So I went and applied for the film commission and became an intern there. And I was like, no, I'm going to really make sure I stand out. But there's always that balance you have to do when you're standing out, because there's a level point where you can actually become annoying. And, right? I mean, there's a point where you can become annoying. So you always have to do that balance. How do you stand out? And so that was a big turning point for me at the internship, because I wanted to stand out. And sure enough, 6 months later, when someone resigned from the office, you know, they called in a bunch of people to come in and, you know, interview. And they hired me. Yeah. And so I stayed with it for a while, and I kept on wanting to say to myself, I'm going to go creatively insane if I only just stay in an office. And so when I started with speaking to schools, I started going to NYU, and I was talking to the schools, and then eventually I was like, no, I'm going to try to produce some graduate student films. And I think it's always just bringing your A game. It's always bringing that passion, your A game, bringing that level of persistence that you need to do it in the business. At least that was for me. And it's kind of evolved. I agree with everyone so far. It's not one moment. It isn't like all of a sudden someone gave you an opportunity. It's constantly building those moments and keep on adding it. Even now, it's weird because when we produced my first feature, I remember the moment I was like, I'm going to make this movie whether I've got $4.55 or whether I raise $200,000. I'm just going to make it. So it's just those moments all kind of add up at the end of the day.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, same as what everybody's saying. I think it was, a first combination of like showing up on time, doing the work, being someone reliable, being someone that people can count on, and just doing that and kind of using your work and your passion for what you're doing to cultivate human relationships, and then to, like you were saying, do favors for people. They're going to do favors for you. You start to put yourself into a position where you're someone that people can rely on. I've never gotten a job by just soliciting a resume without knowing somebody. I've always had, literally I've gotten, like, besides freelance work, like 2 major jobs in my life, and I stayed at those jobs for a long time, and both times I had someone put my resume on the top of the pile. They didn't give me the job, but I was put into a position through human relationships that I had established where I was able to call in favors and say, look, I know you're going to look at a lot of people, but can you really look at me? And try and kind of push my resume to the top of the pile. And then the other thing, just to reiterate what you were saying, like, punch above your weight. Like, try and be with people that are better than you all the time, because it's going to make you do better. I always tried to be around people that knew what they were doing, and then try to steal as much of their knowledge and mojo that I could, and try and so I always tried to play with people that were much better than me, and that's the way kind of I learned how to do it. And then really it's those, I'll just come back to just human relationships all the time. It's just be someone that people want to be around. In this industry, when you're on a film set or a television set with people for 10, 11, 12 hours every day, you want to like them. You want to spend time with those people, and you really have to cultivate those relationships. And so much in this industry, I think you'll find, is that social and professional, there's a lot of overlap between those things, and it's how you navigate that, and just always being mindful that I might meet you and not have any understanding of your background, but I have to treat you with the utmost respect and professionalism, because at some point there may be something that you have that I want, And I'll just give you just a quick anecdote, just so you guys have a little kind of understanding of how this works. When I was first in the casting office, and I was the office manager, I was at the front desk, and if you know anything about acting, you when you do casting, sometimes, like, when you move on to another part, you're done with that other part for the day, and then you move on to this other part. So this actor came in, he was very late for the audition, and he missed his slot, and we had already moved on to another role. And because he was frustrated with being late, he took that out on me. And he was very vocally, like, angry with me and yelled at me as if it was my fault that they went on to another part. So I was the office manager, right? But then in 2 years, I was a casting director. I never saw that actor in my office again. Never brought him in again. And maybe that's petty, but there's a lot of talented people around, and, I didn't need him to come in, and you just have to treat everyone with respect on the way up, because you're going to meet them again. There's a lot of people in this industry, that's true, but when you start to do it, you start to see that it's actually a much smaller world than you think it is.
Small.
So treat everyone with respect, be professional. And there's no substitution for hard work too. You just have to grind.
To add on to that too, it's like, yes, professionals within the industry, but for a School of Visual Arts and for several other universities, art schools, your teachers are also professionals, and even if they're not a working professional, they might have the connections with people that are working within the industry. And it's really interesting as I've been teaching and kind of you know, now that it's like, I don't remember what my experience was quite while I was in school, but I do remember that like desire for your grade to be good, and then like I remember stories of like students, you know, begging for a change in a grade or whatever else, and if they don't get that, the frustration and anger that they take out on teachers. And just remember that like, you know, your teacher might be in the position to say like, okay, this person is not professional and, you know, blames other people for their mistakes. And I don't want to hire that. I will tell everybody I know not to like hire this person, you know? But yeah, just remember that part with your teachers.
I don't care what walk of life, what profession you enter, right? I mean, we mentioned a lot of such great things. Hard work, perseverance, relationships. These are important in every walk of life. And the people that you surround yourself with and that you work with, if they see how hard work and passionate you are, first there, first to arrive, last to leave, if you have a drive and a work ethic that meets theirs, well, guess what? They're going to want to work with you. They're going to want to open up doors for you. And I think you have to be open to new ideas, because what I gather in our short time together, panelists, what I gather is you have done so many different things, worked on so many different projects. Life and your careers have taken you in different directions, but all you want is that opportunity. My father once always said, success is when preparation meets opportunity. How do you define success? That's relative. But you're always preparing for that moment, and you never know when that opportunity is going to knock. And you might be looking down this path and not have any idea what's going on over here, but suddenly a knock comes from over here. You have to be willing to accept that. Allison, you and I were talking before, and I asked, hey, have you ever worked in animation like Ellen has? And you said, good question. No. But what was your answer? Something that you hadn't done before.
Yeah, I said no, but I actually have worked on a film with puppets, which is really, really cool and a different experience that I had never done before. Usually it's live action, but working with puppets was a whole other level of, you know, with puppeteers and the person who created the puppets, and then also with visual effects and the work we had to do in post to, you know, bring it to, you know, finalize it, really. It was really a great opportunity.
Yeah, and who knows, maybe some puppet master may come and call on you. Yes, I've worked with puppets. I have experience with puppets. I was at a workshop once recently with, he is now, you talk about a DP, he is now, he shoots everything you see for NASA. This man films. He is the head of, I guess, photography, you could say, at NASA. So, but his career took him in different paths. At one point, somebody said, hey, can you shoot sports? He had never shot sports before. What was his answer? Sure, I can shoot sports. He figured out how to shoot sports. Can you shoot underwater? Sure. He didn't shoot, he had never shot with an underwater camera before. He figured it out. So you have to be willing to do things like that, but all of your experiences you can take into one. So I asked panelists, has there been something you want to talk, Marissa?
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, be able to retool. I think this industry, like, build your creative narrative around your career as well. I think that's an exciting thing. I mean, I come from the legal background. I was doing commercial real estate, but before that I was working on indie productions in Brooklyn and Russian neighborhoods. Like, what?
How did I get here?
But I did what I had to do, you know, to build that experience. And I think that's what's important. Understand where your brand is. Live in a realm of authenticity, of who you are and what it is that you want, and seek it out. Don't take no for an answer. There's a lot of no's in this industry. I'm hard of hearing, so I just say not right now. You know? And then figure it out. But everything that I'm echoing what's been said already is being able to network with people and have the emotional intelligence and social skills to be able to network creatively and strategically, I think is very key to make it in this industry.
And keep numbers of everyone, right? I'm sure you all have, we're old enough, all of us, Ellen, you too, I would assume, are old enough to have a Rolodex or some sort of, you know, paper, a phone book, whatever it might be. You had one when you were younger. Whatever it might be, I still have a flip form of Rolodex that now I have finally converted into my phone. But God forbid you ever lose that phone and something ever happens to it. You must have some form of keeping numbers and contacts, I don't care what it is, because you never know. Roger, you alluded to this. You never know who you might run into at some point in your life and what that person may ask of you or what you might ask of them. So watch what you say, watch who you say it to, because you don't know how you're going to come into contact with that person. So the power of a Rolodex is really, really important, that I'm sure all of you have grown to love and nurture.
Well, and social media kind of can help us in that way, right? So, you know, whether you're on Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever, you know, connect with people, and, you know, that's another way to stay kind of at top of their mind, right? You know, you don't have to be badgering people or annoying about it, but just, you know, if you're in the sphere that they're spending their time in, it can only help you, hopefully, to have those connections. So something to keep in mind.
How much of a self-promoter do you have to be? Do you have to be a little egotistical? Do you have to, you know, we say don't take no for an answer, but, you know, you have to be willing to get it out there and take chances, and how, you know, how do you do that? How do you say, look at me?
It's a balance. I mean, I think there's a different, you know, everybody has their own level of comfort when it comes to that. But I think it's finding what works for you. But also, you know, I think early on for me, you know, at least on social media, I was looking at what other people were doing, and the things that I felt were interesting and I was reacting to, and, you know, I was kind of wanted to emulate those people and the things that I liked, you know, and the second I was turned off by somebody, I was like, all right, I will never do that, you know. So a lot of the times I think it's like learning and seeing who's around you and emulating that.
And I think another thing too is kind of watch, find those that you can kind of emulate or just look up to and take some of the skills that they have. Watch closely. I feel a lot of times those who are very seasoned in the industry tend to be very quiet. Like, people come to them, they don't go to people and like, hey, I do this, da, da, da. But, you know, it's more, you just feel their energy. They understand their experience, they understand their worth, and they're able to kind of self-promote that way in a very nuanced way. So I think it is a little bit of that balance and being able to understand when to kind of pull the card and, you know, express your skill sets, but also being able to hone it in a little bit, and be humble.
Can I just I would, all of this stuff is good, but one thing I think you got to always remember is, whatever the craft that you're trying to do is, get as good as possible at doing that. That's going to be the first thing. You know, people ask me, I want to be an actor. How to become a successful actor? I tell them, first, get very good at acting. Like, be undeniably good at it. That is the first step. Getting extraordinarily good at it. And that is time. There is no shortcut. There is no, you have to practice, whatever it is that you're doing. Do it over and over and over again. Refine it. Get better at it. Pay attention to detail. Like you were saying, observe the people that are successful. Try and emulate that and develop a skill set and be good at it. And sometimes people skip that part. You know, I meet a lot of people that are like, well, this actor is getting like a lot of, they have a lot of likes on social media, or they're an Instagram star, so that is going to be kind of what puts them in a film or a play. Or I haven't seen that happen yet to this point. I mean, in very small dosage. This girl in the Florida Project was like an online presence, but more often than not, it's not that by itself. It's getting extraordinarily good at doing what you're doing first, and then, you know, marketing yourself and self-promoting. But don't skip the part of learning how to do whatever it is that you're looking to do and learning how to do that in a very effective way. Because I think, especially with young people now, I feel like sometimes there's this idea that you can kind of jump ahead of actually learning how to do the thing you're trying to do. And some
7 to 10 years.
Yeah, you know, the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours, which I actually subscribe to. I actually think it's a pretty, you know, it's a little bit of a very finite idea, but I believe that. I believe it is the time that you put into doing something and doing it over an extended period of time and building that muscle memory and then being able to apply that. But I think you just have to do it again and again and again and repeat and repeat and repeat and refine and get better, you know, and people, I think sometimes people are too focused on the end result rather than the practice of learning how to do what you do very well.
Yeah, I really like what you said about focusing on, because I see a lot of like younger reels and business cards sometimes where it's like director, DP, you know, like editor, yada yada. Like they have all these little like things about what they can do, but it's like, no, they did it once, you know, and often when you're looking for somebody to fill a role, you want them to be good at the role that you're hiring them for. And then once you get really good at that specific, you know, whatever it is, then you can like be sure when you're like showing your portfolio or your website and card that you're very clear about what you do, and that the information is clear, because for us, when you're looking through portfolios and reels, there's so many of them, and if your reel isn't immediately on your front page, then it's like I have to dig for it, I have to click all these different links, I might have to download something, like that's just all of a sudden I don't want to do that anymore, you know? Or if I click on a website and the background's like bright blue or like really painful on my eyes, like, all right, I'm not it's happened, you know, I'm not gonna wanna like stay here and learn more about you. So like having the skill set and then just that professional looking, you know, way to present your skills.
Okay, questions? I saw this gentleman in the front row here in the middle with his hand up first, then one in the middle of the middle row.
Speaking of young kids trying to jump ahead, hi, I'm Cameron, I'm 19, and I've been making shorts for around 5 years now, I'd say, and my big thing is, you know, I'm making shorts with my friends and having a blast doing it, but I want to become a professional and be taken seriously, and my question is, how do I take that next step? You know, if it is through money or through, you know, getting connections, like how can I make that next step to become more professional, to seem more professional?
Well, I've definitely followed, you know, kind of some YouTubers or video content creators from the beginning of where they've started to like at the end, and you can really see the really popular ones, like their production value increasing and just like getting, you know, better sound quality, getting like a proper, you know, stand for your camera so it's not shaky all the time, you know, just like looking, kind of comparing a home video and what makes something, you know, professional looking. And then I feel like that can do a lot to just push you forward into professional. I mean, technically professional work is just work that you get paid for.
You're doing it, man. You know? You're doing what you're supposed to do. You've been making films for 5 years. I'm sure you're getting better with each one. You're getting more polished. You're learning from your mistakes. Filmmaking is just so many mistakes, and you're just learning to correct on the next film the mistakes that you made on the last film. So I think you're doing it. And then eventually you're going to hit with a story that resonates with people. Story, I think, is the most important thing for filmmakers. Is just keep coming back to story, story, story. Is this the story worth telling? And what is the best possible way for me to tell this story, and then refine it and get good at it and learn from your mistakes? But I think you're doing it. You're doing what you're supposed to do.
I think mistakes is a really key word, because when you're professional, nobody wants to know about mistakes. But make all the mistakes you can now, because you will learn from them. And when you make a mistake, figure out what the problem was, know how to get beyond it, know how to avoid it, as long as you see things as challenges and not pitfalls.
I was going to say, I think also the biggest thing is just to keep on doing it. just keep on doing it. Because everyone, we meet a lot of people at the Film Commission, and we do a lot of interns, and they talk about stuff, and they talk about it, and they're not doing it. And so you're 5 years, you're making these films, that should be your goal, and you're going to keep on getting better. But you're doing it instead of talking about it. If you're a writer, you should be writing. And, I'm having a tough time. I get the writer's block, all that kind of stuff, but maybe then you should be writing shorts. But you should be doing it, because each time you're going to do it, you're going to have mistakes, you're going to get better, you're going to learn from it. And, recently I started doing this web series thing, and it's been 5 years since I've done anything, and I made mistakes because I haven't been doing it. And so you want to keep on staying at your craft, whatever it is, and become very good at what your craft is.
We have a question in the middle row. And then someone had a question over here? Okay.
Whew. All right, so I'm a college senior now, going to be making my senior thesis film. And now, because I am a senior and in college, well, you don't got bills, you got bills. And so I got to finance this thing by myself. How should I go about it?
Well, what college are you at?
Messiah College in Grantham, PA.
Okay, so I don't know about PA. So one of the things I would do, just from my point of view, is I would touch base with their film commission or whatever the entity there. Because if you were to come to us and tell us, we get a lot of students from Montclair State, Fairleigh Dickinson University. When they come to us, we sit down and we analyze what they're looking to accomplish, and then we try to figure out how cheap we actually can help them. So we'll go through the story with them, actually. It's a character in a hospital. Well, you don't actually have to shoot in a hospital. It's very difficult to shoot in a hospital. What is the shot? Is it the character in a bed? Is it a character walking down a hallway? So one of the things I would do is probably do that, and then obviously the discussion of crowdfunding. But I would meet with them if they have that, because they may give you some insight into that, and we do it all the time at our office with college students. We get it to help them as cheap as possible.
One of the biggest skills I think you can have in this industry is doing things that look very expensive, but you find a way to do it for as little money as possible, and it's an extraordinary skill if you're able to do that. So try to make as much as you can with little. Try and be creative in kind of how you think about the project that you're going to make. I know I have, I work at a school. I have students that have spent $10,000 on their thesis film, and I have students that have spent $200 on their thesis film. And generally, not every time, but generally, the people that spend less money are generally better, because they've had to make do with less, so they had to get creative. It forced them into a creative box. I come back to certain filmmakers. You think about like Quentin Tarantino. He made Reservoir Dogs. There's 2 locations. 80%, over 80% of that movie takes place in one place. Every character is wearing the same costume throughout the entire film. There's a reason why he made choices like that, so that he could shoot that film very inexpensively. If he had 20 different locations and costume changes, it would have been much more difficult to do what he was trying to accomplish. So he thought of creative ways to make that movie on the cheap. You look at all these very famous directors. If you study directors, all these guys who worked with Roger Corman, like Martin Scorsese, or like all of these guys in the late 60s and early 70s, they cut their teeth making films for no money and trying to be as creative as possible. So don't let money be a limitation, and then call in every single favor that you can ever call in. Try and enlist your friends, your family, have your mom do craft services on the set, and just try and cut your budget as much as possible and try and find creative ways to make something look like it costs a lot more money than you did. And that's not only a skill that's gonna help you with your thesis, that's a skill that is gonna make you hireable when you get out, because you love people that can come up with creative solutions to having no money.
And 2 words, pre-production, organization. Those 2 things, anything you think about ahead of time is something that you won't need to think about on set. The more organized you are, the better everything will go. You know, you want to think about all these things. It's good that you're thinking about them now, because this is what's going to propel you through. You know, you really want to break it down. Then when you look at your shots, you know, when you storyboard everything, you can see exactly what you need. You say, okay, I don't need to dress this entire room. I only need to dress 40% of the room. You know, you start playing the I only need game. And you can be, when you get successful at that, your savings start rolling in.
Yeah, and for anyone that might be interested in doing like visual effects in their films, you know, like there's this thing that's being said, fix it in post. Don't fix it in post. No, just storyboard and plan, you know, accordingly so that you know what's going to happen, you know, because fixing it in post doesn't always work out, as we've seen with Superman's mustache. You know, like that's not going to work for everybody, and you're not going to have the money for that, you know. So just remember, I think somebody else was talking to me recently about a live action shooting a party and like not having enough actors to do that. And so what they were doing was layering the scene, like having a camera on a tripod that doesn't move, like film it where a bunch of people are here, film it with a bunch of people here, like changing costumes so that they can just make 5 people fill a room and look like there's like, you know, 50 people in there. So just thinking of those ways to you know, just make a lot with a little.
It's an interesting thing because there's been a whole digital revolution, right? So like anyone can, you know, theoretically anyone can make a film now. There isn't these cost restrictions. It doesn't mean they're going to make a good film. Like the fact that it's easier to make a film and to shoot on digital hasn't made more good films. There's been a lot more films, but that doesn't mean there's a lot more good films. And I think when people were shooting on film, they had to be very economical, and they had to be very specific, and they had to, like you said, plan everything out extraordinarily well. And now people get into the trap sometimes because you can just let a digital camera go and you can fill a card, that they just feel like if they just shoot a bunch, they'll be able to kind of put it together in the end. Whereas filmmakers used to have to be a lot more economical with the way that they shot. And I think that that's something to think about. Still trying to plan as if every minute and every minute that you roll is costing you money. So like you said, you know, pre-plan as much as possible. I remember hearing about the Coen brothers, and you can read about you can research a lot of this stuff, but read about the Coen brothers, how they made the movie Blood Simple. Like you said, every single shot storyboarded. They were doing 1 or 2 takes of every scene moving on because they planned it so meticulously that they had shot the movie completely in their head before they ever turned the camera on. And yeah, I think people now feel like they can be a little looser with that because it's digital. I can just shoot and then we'll figure it out. But I think you have to be a lot more specific than that.
I know that's what Alfred Hitchcock once said, that he boasted, you know, when the storyboards were completed, that's when he knew the film was basically completed. The rest was easy. You know, storyboarding was so key. David?
But you do really want to know don't say, okay, we'll just fix it in post, but you need to know what you can do in post, because there are so many things you can do in post now that you couldn't do 5 or 10 or 15 years ago. And even the things that you could do 10 years ago cost 10 times less because you can do them now in post. But you have to understand post, you have to understand what you can do, and you have to plan.
Okay, I know that some of the young ladies over here had a couple of questions, so let's shift the microphone to the front row over here.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Laura. Laura, I have actually 2 questions, but the one's pretty quick. It's for David. With the new tax incentives and newer production companies and filmmakers, is there a budget that has to be in place not in place, but do you have to have your project or projects at an estimated specific budget before we use the tax incentive?
So the way the tax incentive works, two things haven't happened yet. First, the New Jersey Economic Development Authority has not thrown up the application that you would apply. But once you do apply, you have to put what your budget is going to be and also what you're expecting to get back. And so once you've done that, what the Economic Development Authority will do once you're put in the queue is they don't put the money aside, but they put the credit aside. So if you're going to be getting $2 million, $500,000, they're going to allocate that money onto the side. One of the things we've done with the tax incentive this time around is that once you're approved, or depending on when you're supposed to start, once you're approved, you have 180 days, 150 days, don't quote me on the exact amount, you have to start your production within that time period. In the previous tax incentive, when we had it, once you were in the queue, you were in the queue. And that meant, oh, I'm going to make the movie sometime in November, then it turns another year, and you're obligating money that other filmmakers can have. So I think the question is, you have to put a budget together, and you have to tell them what you're expecting to make.
Okay, so it can be like basically any budget.
No, you have to let them know what you're making, and then the key is there's two thresholds. One is that you spend $1 million in New Jersey, or you spend 60% of your budget. And so I always tell people that you better not be spending 61.5% of your budget here, because when you get audited and they decide that they remove 3% of your line items, you're now at 59, 58%. You're not going to get it. The question also comes up, how much should your budget be? So if you're doing a $100,000 feature film and you're going to be applying for the 30% tax and credit, it may not be worth it to apply for the tax credit, because you have to have a CPA audit, and a CPA audit's going to cost $8,000 to $15,000. So if that audit takes place in New Jersey, that 30% would count as well. But for your $100,000 film, is it worth paying $15,000 for a CPA audit? So, $300,000, $350,000, $450,000, it's probably worth it at the end of the day to actually apply for the credit.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I had was for Maria?
Marissa.
Marissa, I'm sorry, got the M. So you do entertainment law. One of the things that I'm trying to figure out, we were looking for an entertainment lawyer, but we also need agreements and everything for the business itself as well as for projects. Does someone like in your position, would you do the overall of the business as well as each individual project for a production company? Or is that something where a production company would look at having an entertainment lawyer for their business separately from each project they produce?
It depends on the services that you're looking for and, what's affordable for you, right? I always, as far as my practice, I talk to clients in terms of, setting up your company if you haven't set anything up yet, because I say you've got to start building your brand. With that said, you need to incorporate. And the reason why you need to incorporate is you want to make sure that your chain of title for all of your works is very clear, so that way by the time you get to distribution, nothing's kind of hanging you up in the balance. But with that said, however, we would have to strategize in terms of whether or not you're housing all of your projects within one entity, or if you're actually going to create multiple entities to house per project, similar to, let's say, Disney, right? You have Disney Holdings, and then underneath that, they've got all these subsidiaries for different entertainment projects to insulate that project in case there's a lawsuit or any issue that comes down the line. Hopefully there doesn't, but you never know. But I also offer my services as production counsel. So for me, usually when I get involved, I like to get involved and stay with you through the process, because you're going to come up with a bunch of different types of legal issues. And rather than, come and shop at the time that you need it, you can't be the doctor and the patient. Sometimes you don't even know exactly what is a potential legal issue. So if you have an attorney that's kind of on board, assisting in the process and understands the business, they'll be able to help you with the agreements, but also kind of maneuver from development, pre-production phase all the way through distribution into the marketplace.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, question in the front row, this young woman.
Hello, my name is Apples, and my question is for Roger. Do you Do you find it hard for an actor to get like the big movie roles or the TV shows when they don't have an agent, like going on backstage or the casting networks just looking for the different roles? Like, how different is it when you actually have the agent? Because I did hear that when you have an agent, like, they get some of the real good stuff and maybe some of the things.
Yeah,
that you
there's going to
don't
be a lot of
see.
stuff that's never going to be listed on Backstage or Actors Access or anything like that that are only going to go through agents. And I mean, when you're trying to work in, it depends on what you're doing, television or film, because it works slightly differently. But yes, you're going to get to a certain point where you're going to need an agent, and you're not going to get in the door without having an agent. But don't let that stop you from the beginning of the process of starting to self-submit for work and trying to audition. There's no fast track, right? You have to start to audition for stuff. The way that you get an agent is by working, because the more you work begets work. If you start working on your own, an agent's going to want to take some of that money. And they're like, this girl Apples is working. I want to get 10% of that money. I'm going to sign Apples, and now I'm going to start sending her out on stuff. So you have to work initially, and work will beget work for you. But yes, there's going to be a ton of stuff that would be limited to you that you would have absolutely no access to without having an agent. So you have to do what you can until you get to that point where you do have an agent, and just try and work, create your own work with people better than you. Like I tell people, there's ways that you go about it, because the first step is, how do you get an agent? Well, work with people that have agents, because then they're going to come see your showcase, and if they like you, they're going to sign you. It's like, I'll have actors, they get out of school, they don't have an agent, they go to do like a 2.5-hour production of Waiting for Godot or something, right? Which is great, which I love it. But think about it, right? An agent then goes to see that. In the first 2 minutes, they saw every single actor that's going to be on stage. They have to sit there for another 2.5 hours through to the end of that play. No, go do a showcase with 10 other actors that's 45 minutes long, that some of those actors are very, very good, and that's more likely to have kind of an agent in the audience. And you have to surround yourself with people that are doing good work, and then you have to work on your own. And if you work on your own, eventually an agent's going to find you. And they're going to say, she's making money, I want a piece of that. Now with me, when I was doing casting full-time, if I wanted to hire an actor that didn't have an agent, but I wanted to hire them for a professional job, I'd refer them to an agent. Because I'm not then going to want to negotiate their contract. That's not what I do. I'm not going to work with your scheduling. So let's say you got into the office somehow without an agent, and then you book something, I would probably refer you to someone who would be willing to work with you, because you already have work, right? And now they're going to kind of work on the logistics with you. And yeah, I mean, you got to start where you can. But yeah, you're not going to be able to audition for a leading role in any kind of film that has any kind of real budget without having representation that gets you in front of there, unless you've been in front of the casting director before. And with television, it's even much more different than that, because you actually go through tiers. You start, you might be an under 5, then a day player, then the guest star, and you have to go through these things before you even get to the point where you're auditioning for the above the title roles or anything like that. So there's a process to go through it. But yeah, a lot of like the big stuff, you're not going to see, I'm going to audition for Rey in Star Wars because I saw it on Actors Access. That's not going to happen. So it's like, you have to, at some point, yes, you will need an agent. Yeah.
And yes, and I'll say this. I mean, the reality from my understanding is that breakdown services, I mean, they dominate the industry in terms of those types of roles that, would be appealing for actors. But with that said, that's given to agents, generally speaking, where they open it up to. But as I'm the spirit of, maybe not right now, but you work for it and you hunt it out. Definitely take the time to research different types of agents within your market. And one way you can do that is through SAG-AFTRA. SAG-AFTRA, any franchise talent agency, they go through a huge process to become franchise agents. I helped a company become franchise, and it was a lengthy process. But with that said, they have to adhere to SAG-AFTRA's regulations. But they're going to have, more so on their website, they'll tell you what kind of talent they're looking for as well, right? And then you want to question what kind of projects do you generally look for? I mean, some agents are better in commercials, some agents are great for theater, some are great for film and television. So you really have to do your research too, because you want to make sure before you sign with an agent, that agent's going to be in your best interest and actually help propel your career in the direction you want to go.
Hi, I'm a high school student and I've always been interested in film, and lately I've been wanting to know how to get more into animation.
Oh, all right.
All right.
All righty, here we go. Well, that's awesome, you know, to have that interest so early and to know that. Specifically for me, I had, you know, like I've been drawing since I was, I don't know, 5. And I knew I wanted to do something within art. And I was very lucky where my dad was a fine artist, didn't quite make it. So when I was like, Dad, I want to be an artist, he was like, you know. But he had the foresight to kind of say, like, digital is the future, you know. So what he did for me was he bought me a Wacom tablet. And for anybody within animation, that's something that's like you can draw on the computer. And there are free programs available, but the industry standard is Photoshop. And I'm pretty sure all of these things have like student licenses where you can use it for free or whatever. And I got ahead of the game because, you know, middle school, high school, I was already learning this program. And so by the time I get into college, you know, I was a pro and like it's a new medium. So like you're not going to be like, even if you can draw really well with a pencil, it's not going to transition, you know. And so learning that program was this leg up. Next thing was that I took a pre-college course with 3D animation, which is, I think, junior year of high school. And that was really great to kind of get me excited and a little bit of an understanding of what's possible in this like world of animation. And that really like drove me to be like, yes, I want to do this, you know, because the other thing is my parents instill this like caution with me, like, cause like you want to go into animation, you still want to be able to make a living and like survive and thrive. And so whatever you decide to do, always be proactive in like looking for the job opportunities, because like in this digital world of online and internet, there's so many opportunities of animation now, and there's so many different ways you can apply it. There isn't just the one path of being a Disney animator. You know, you can make original content, and that can spiral into something out like amazing. You know, so yeah, it's awesome that you know now and you're interested in it. And I feel it wasn't my understanding. I went to LaGuardia High School, which is the FAME school, and they had an art major program. But for us, there wasn't any kind of digital program, you know, at the time. And now I'm seeing these high school.
We're doing it in Cedar Grove. We've actually this past year we've introduced animation into our art curriculum.
That's amazing.
And this year they're actually going to be doing all 2D animation and stuff like that.
Yeah. And there's so many different kinds of animation too. There's like After Effects, which is like motion graphics, and then there's like the Disney kind of like frame by frame animation, where there are all these different programs that you can use, and that will create different styles. Like Flash animation is different from, you know, Toon Boom, and it's kind of just knowing what you want to do, and then asking like, hey, like what program might you guys be using that I can maybe get a head start of for learning, you know, and yeah.
And I would say research. I mean, we're in a digital age where it seems like information is out there, you just gotta find it. So, I mean, look at YouTube, see if people have like how-to clips and certain things that you're interested in animation. LinkedIn Learning, lynda.com. Those are just a few that I'm thinking off the top of my head of, you know, just kind of looking at different online tools to kind of help build that, your own personal academic curriculum in the area that you want to really practice in.
And I'm sure that there are workshops out there, summer workshops, seminars.
You should totally study at New York Film Academy in 3D animation.
The
Shameless plug.
The courses thing actually is interesting because with our field, if you're a designer or whatever else, you might not necessarily need to go to college. There's so many online courses or even just like trade schools specific to animation that you can do now even, you know, that do like a webcam situation and you can learn and practice on your own. And just getting really good at the craft, you know.
But make sure when you leave high school, you've got a body of work that you've created.
Yeah.
Really stretched your imagination and where it is. You want to make sure you do not leave high school without it, because you have an amazing opportunity now where you're only concentrating on one thing. You know, if that's what you want to do, just don't leave high school without creating it.
But I want to give a plug for college, however, and the idea that I know in terms of working and getting out, that many of my jobs came from people that I went to either college or grad school with. And basically, if all you are is online, it's very hard to develop the same kind of, oh, I know his work, he can do this, she can do this, and so on. It's very hard to either recommend people or be recommended. That if you know people in person, and that's one of the big pluses of in-person learning.
Yes, for sure. SVA, like, it was so great because, like, that you pay for networking. That's what you're paying for. A lot of people might not necessarily grow or learn as much within the courses. You know, like, you get your experience when you're out in the field and like actually working or interning, but that's what you're paying for with the network. And on that end, you also have to do research. Just like, not all colleges have the same networking opportunities or like as good of a network as others. So like, if you are planning on going to college, just really research who's working there, who's the professor, who's the alumni, you know, like all of those things, just so that you know, like, okay, I know that SVA has all these connections with Cartoon Network, you know, so that's where I want to go. So that's where you want to apply to.
Okay, last comment.
And I would say that everybody in here is doing what they need to be doing. This is could be a great first step. Come to events, meet people in the industry, network, and if you're interested in animation, at the end of this, you should come up and get Ellen's information. This is the way it works. So don't be shy, make those connections, and get in touch afterwards.
All right, panelists, thank you very much. That ends our panel discussion. Round of applause for Allison, David, Ellen, Roger, Marissa, and David.